Good evening, and thank you, community, for joining us tonight. I apologize for a couple-minute delay due to technical difficulties, but we appreciate you taking time to join us. Mental health is an important topic for our students, staff, and families. We will have several speakers sharing information this evening. Near the end of the presentation, we will open a question and answer, a question and answer box. If you have questions, you can pose them in that text, and we will relay them to our presenters towards the end of the formal presentation. So I'd like to start by introducing our Superintendent of Chippewa Valley Schools, Mr. Ron Roberts.
Okay. So Sarah, you're just you'll move forward on the PowerPoint, is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, we can start. It's good to be here. There we go. So this evening for our presentation on mental health and the status of things we have to offer in Chippewa Valley Schools, we have some people that will be speaking, and you can see a list here of people who are very knowledgeable about this topic in our school district. So we have Dr. Charlene McGunn, who's our Executive Director of Chippewa Valley Coalition for Youth and Families, Dr. Donald Brodsky, Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, Marina Licari, Executive Director of Elementary Education, Paul Sibley from Secondary Education. We have two people from Alliance who we have a partnership with. We have Ken Sharkey, the President of Alliance, and Melissa Pardalis, who's an account manager with Alliance. So these people are quite knowledgeable, as I said, and I think you'll find what they talk about very interesting. So we can move forward. So some of the things we're going to be covering today are the results of a mental health survey that was done for parents in 2022. I think that's the one. I'm going to talk briefly about that. Perspective on youth mental health today, and that will be Dr. McGunn. And then district resources, and that will be our people from Educational Services, who I mentioned earlier. And then also the people from Alliance, Melissa and Kent, and we're going to talk about the Student Life Advisor Program for K-12 students. So we're going to start here with a mental health survey that was done in fall of 2022, and you can see the number of respondents we had on this survey, and you can also see just a couple of very important results of this survey. And this was just beyond COVID. And you can see here that 71% of our elementary parents and 81% of our middle and high school parents felt students struggled more emotionally today than they did pre-COVID. Now, we haven't done that same survey since that time. Maybe the numbers would be a little bit different, but as educators in schools, we still see some significant emotional issues post-COVID with students. So we think that's really important, and that kind of set us on the path for things that we do in Chippewa Valley Schools. Now, this was another part. Well, this was actually a part of that survey, and you can see here. And I think these numbers are quite telling, in that 74% of our elementary parents and the same percentage of middle and high school parents thought that mental health services were insufficient. So that gave us some clues that we needed to do some things. And furthermore, 40% of our elementary families and 58% of our middle and high school families said they would take advantage of it if it were available. So, and if we go forward, this was a survey, and we're really just now compiling the results of this. We surveyed our exiting seniors and the parents of our exiting seniors. Overall, we did that survey just to get their thoughts on, their child's experience with Chippewa Valley Schools. We did it for students to get their thoughts, and then what the parents thought of their students' experience. And you can see here that 55% of our parents agree or strongly agreed that if their child was struggling, that there were resources available. So, and you see only 46% of the students responded the same way, agreeing or strongly agreeing that resources were available. Now, to let you know that there were five responses that that people could make on this, and there's a a large percentage of people who are kind of in the middle. They responded with a 3, and so that put them kind of in the middle. So, but I think what this still says to us at this point is that we do have services available, but we need to make people more aware of them. So that will give us some work going forward related to, just making sure people are aware of mental health services that we provide in our school district and how our students can access them. So we're going to talk about some of those things here tonight too. So we can go forward, Sarah. So some of the things we did, and this was after the 2022 survey, we hired one new counselor at Chippewa Valley High School and another one at Dakota High School. We hired an additional social worker at the secondary level, and social worker caseloads are kind of dictated by law. And we put an additional one in just to lower lower the case numbers for our social workers so that they could do more intensive work with students. We also hired an intervention specialist for each of our 4 middle schools to work with students who were struggling. And then also, you're going to hear about this tonight, our partnership with Alliance. And as I mentioned earlier, we have people here from Alliance that will talk about what is available to parents and students through the Student Life Advisor Program. So we've done a few things here to meet the needs of our students and our parents. And as I said, some of the survey data shows that we still need to do more. So I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McGunn with the next slide. And this is Dr. Charlene McGunn, and she's a former social worker in our school district. And since she left that position, she has been our director of our coalition. And that coalition plays a really important role in our school district in providing services to families. So Charlene's an expert in this area, and as often as I do hear Charlene, I always like hearing more from Charlene because she always has new things to say and new ways at looking at things. So Charlene, I'm turning it over to you, and you can go right ahead. And you're muted, Charlene. And you're still muted.
Can you hear me?
Charlene, that is perfect.
Good, thank you. I'm going to provide a bit of information from the research that the coalition considers as we plan a range of strategies to address mental health and substance use issues with our students. This is our mission statement. And we work with a range of community agencies. We connect Chippewa Valley schools with parents, with broad range of community to promote drug prevention and to prevent youth suicide. You can advance, Sarah, thank you. First, very quickly, this is a highlight of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, the YRBS. This is a very large national survey conducted by the CDC, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. This is the most recent data, even though it's 2021. Over 17,000 high school students nationally were surveyed anonymously, and a broad range of data related to health factors and mental health factors was produced. Thanks, Sarah. This is just an overview. One of the things we learned, by the way, from this data when we took the long range view is that mental health issues were made worse by the pandemic, but the decline began before the pandemic, within a few years prior to that. This is a capsule of the data from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and again, this is national. 40% combined boys and girls, high school students that completed it, reported what we call major depressive disorder. That is at least one episode of significant sadness and hopelessness that lasted 2 weeks and interfered with their activities. One of the other findings, and it's really consistent with what the results of surveys have shown over the years, is that teenage girls continue to be more vulnerable to the effects of depression. In fact, 3 in 5 of the students nationally, the girls that completed the survey, reported at least one episode of significant depression. And the way we understand this is that adolescent girls are vulnerable to social effects. There's physiological changes undergoing for them that are a little bit more profound than for males generally. And also, one of the interesting pieces of information is that those teenage girls that report more smartphone use for social media are more likely to report depression. And one way to think about that is that it's not in-person connection, it's isolation. Another at-risk group are LGBTQ plus students who are prone to having episodes of sadness and hopelessness. 70% of that national group reported it, and 50% reported a significant episode within the 30 days prior. Next slide. I'm going to go quickly through this. This is a graphical depiction of some of the data. The top line is female students, the bottom line is male students, and you can see graphically shown here that girls, high school girls, over the long range, this is 2011 to 2021, are more likely to report depression. And you can see it's about a 30 percentage point close to that difference between males and females. Not that the report of male depression isn't concerning as well. This is considered suicide. Again, this is the national sample. 30% of the girls, 14% of the boys reported at least considering attempting suicide. And what we really know is that adolescent girls, and actually female across the age range, not just adolescent girls, but girls and women in general, are more likely to attempt suicide, and that males across the age range are more likely to die by suicide because of the use of more lethal means. Next slide. This is the attempt, not the plan. And nationally, 13% of girls and 7% of boys reported a suicide attempt. Next slide. Let's look at our data that is produced by the Michigan Profile for Healthy Youth, which is a survey that comes from the Michigan Department of Education. It is an anonymous survey. It's computer-based. It is administered with parental permission. It's administered to 7th, 9th, and 11th graders, although the items that relate to suicide are not administered in middle school. And so I'll show you a brief capsule of some of that data. And by the way, all of these results are used by the coalition in cooperation with the school district, in consultation with parents, working with community agencies to create a range of programs to address the issues. And this looks, if you look at this graph, it goes from 2016 to 2024. This is our most recent data. And the data produced by MyFi in the school district is very similar to the data produced in school districts across the state. We see a decline. The first item is feeling sad or hopeless, again, that depressive episode, we see a decline for 2024 in ninth grade and a decline in the serious consideration of suicide at the ninth grade. If we look at this over the longitudinal, the long-range view, we see peaks and valleys with trending up, though, even with this recent decline of depression. And then if we look at our 11th graders, there is, if we look at 2016, there is an increase from 2016 to 2024 in those that report depression that's serious by their report, as well as the idea of seriously thinking about suicide. And we are, even though there's a stabilization in recent years, it's 21% of our current 11th graders, there is an increase over the years. Now, if we look at our next slide, the first question relates to a plan for suicide. Here again, we see a decrease at ninth grade, peaks and valleys, a decrease in the planning of suicide in the second question, and that's the attempt of suicide. And we see with 11th grade, and this column is now blue, we do see from 2016 to 2024 increases in planning and increases and a fair stabilization in attempts. And really all of this supports the fact that we need to be very attentive to the mental health issues of our kids. Next slide, Sarah. I'm going to briefly go over another part of MyFi, which is the drug use data that students report. There's a very strong connection between adolescent use of alcohol, marijuana, and vape products and other drugs. And it goes in two directions. Students that have mental health issues are far more likely to use substances to self-medicate, and those that use substances are very likely to experience an increase in depression and anxiety. So if we're going to treat youth mental health, we look very carefully at treating youth substance use. Now, there's good news, because in this data, we are seeing decline in youth vaping, marijuana use, and other drug use. And I'm just going to cover a few points here. Next slide. This is alcohol use. This is the one outlier. We saw an increase in 2024 from 2022, with an increase in the 11th graders reporting use. Notice that use increases from the 7th to 11th grade. That's just always true. But if you look at 2016 to 2024 with our 11th graders, you see a decline over time. So even though there's a bit of an uptick, there is a positive trend overall. We look at marijuana use, again, increase over the grade levels, but look at 2016 and 2024 for 11th grade, we see a substantial decline over time, and 3% difference, increase or decrease, is considered significant. And we do see a decrease from 2022. And then finally, on everyone's mind these days is youth vaping. It's a big issue. Here we see a decline from 2016 to 2024. 15% decline. And by the way, these declines follow the national results of surveys, as well as the results in other places. And that is, we are seeing a fortunate point of some decline in use that we may be able to sustain. Next slide. This is our coalition website. We've been in place for over 30 years. We combine with 20 local churches in a dissemination network, a broad range of community agencies, the police, the court system, youth serving agencies, our Chippewa Valley school staff, and we work together to create a range of strategies that go from prevention information that educates on the dangers, educates students, parents, school, and community about mental health issues and about drug use, as well as at the other end of the continuum, we work with a range of individuals to advocate for social and legal legislative policy that supports our youth. So please visit our website. There's a wealth of information on it that covers youth suicide as well as resiliency and drug prevention. And with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Dr. Don Brodsky.
Thank you, Dr. McGunn. For the next few slides, I'd like to touch on the resources that Chippewa Valley provides for students and families at the elementary, secondary, and district levels. Our outreach and at-risk specialist has been instrumental in the development of consistent practices and procedures that support student well-being through work with school teams and district steering committees. This includes student wellness through Chippewa Cares, which focuses on character, awareness, relationships, engagement, and students' sense of belonging in their schools. The district crisis coordinating team, comprised of social workers, counselors, and school psychologists, assists our school crisis teams in supporting students, parents, and staff when a serious circumstance, such as the death of a student, parent, or staff member occurs. The DCCT also provides information related to crisis response, grief and loss, and community resources. And Dr. McGunn heads the DCCT. And our Parent Education Network works with student assistance specialists to provide resources during district-wide wellness events for students and for families. Please change the slide, sir. An important district resource working with the coalition is the Student Assistance Program, facilitated by our student assistance specialists. The program, available at each high school and ninth grade center, provides services to students and families who are experiencing circumstances that are interfering with their education or quality of life. Students are offered an opportunity to participate in workshops that provide education on the effects of alcohol and other drugs, explore self-esteem issues, problem-solve issues at home, discuss peer pressure, and build decision-making and coping skills. A coalition team councils are the student leaders from Chippewa Valley and Dakota high schools that comprise the youth membership of the coalition. They meet monthly, provide the youth voice of the coalition, organize and conduct various drug prevention and student mental health activities at the elementary, middle school, and high school levels, as well as in the community. The CTCs at both high schools are groups of students who commit to staying drug and alcohol free, are dedicated to promoting mental well-being and suicide awareness, and are leaders in our school and community who promote positive values to make a difference. Membership this year was approximately 150 students, and graduating seniors on the team councils were recognized for their accomplishments by Mr. Roberts, Dr. McGunn, and our student assistance specialist at a coalition meeting just last week. Change, please. As Dr. McGunn mentioned, through the coalition, there are community partnerships that support district students and families in the areas of mental health and drug prevention. Macomb Family Services runs student support groups at Chippewa Valley High School and Dakota at the main buildings and provided intervention programs at the ninth grade centers and at Mohegan. Care of Southeastern Michigan and Henry Ford Health deliver elementary drug prevention programs, support health fairs at the high schools and coalition events, and provide parenting education. We also have connections with the MSU Medical School, U of D Mercy, and a number of police, Macomb County agencies, including the Macomb County Community Mental Health, which is the public provider of mental health, substance abuse, and developmental disability treatment services in Macomb County. Turning Point, which is a nonprofit, it provides confidential services for survivors of domestic violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking. And Clinton Township Police and Macomb County Sheriff's Department. At this time, change slide, please. We'll turn it over to Ms. Marina Licari, who will talk to you about elementary resources throughout the district.
Thank you, Dr. Broski. So as we have highlighted so far, you can see there are many district resources to support our students and as well to support our staff so that we can do our best at supporting students. At the elementary level, we have many additional resources that really are the same also at our secondary level. As you can see, some of those resources listed on the screen, but really what we're most proud about at our elementary and secondary level is that each of our schools have a positive behavior intervention support system in place. And PBIS, as we refer to it often, is really not a program or a scripted program, but it's really a commitment of our staff to create a system in which students have a positive and predictable safe learning environment. And the way we do that is by making sure that as a school, we align those classroom expectations, those classroom behaviors. We work as a team, all hands on deck, to teach those expectations to students so there aren't any surprises. We model those expectations. Often you'll find in some of our elementary schools and our secondary schools that staff or student leaders take some time and even create videos to model those expected behaviors. Part of PBIS is really working with students so they not only know what to expect and what's expected of them, but working with students to help them to identify ways in which they can prevent any negative situations, but also how to respond to an unwanted situation. We often focus on valuable character traits that we reinforce as a school, highlight, again, act out or model and celebrate. PBIS is really about celebrating those positive choices, making sure that students know what to expect, but also are acknowledged for meeting those expectations so that we can create that safe learning environment, and really committed as a staff, whether it be at the elementary level or the secondary level, to commit to all of our students and providing them the supports that they need, whether those supports be at the academic level, their behavior, their social, emotional well-being, but that commitment through a school system to identify what can we do to support our students, what can we do to monitor that support by reviewing any data that we have and determining as a staff, perhaps we may need to pivot or provide additional support in other areas. If we do find ourselves needing additional support, as you can see, we have some valuable resources in all of our buildings. We have committed social workers in each of our buildings that work closely with our building administrators and building staff members to ensure that we provide the resources and support necessary, but also often to just brainstorm and identify how can we help, what can we do, and how can we ensure that everyone is supported in our building, not only our students, not only our staff, but often we work with families to make sure that they have the support that they need. We also have school psychologists in each of our buildings that work with our ancillary team that includes our social workers and also our building administrators to ensure that we have systems in place and additional supports when needed if something doesn't work, to help us to pivot and review data to determine what we might do differently. In each of our buildings, we have a dedicated building crisis team. In the event that something does happen that requires, again, an all hands on deck approach, perhaps it's after school, there's a negative situation that has occurred, and our building crisis team can work with our district crisis team to make certain that the appropriate supports are there at school to help students or staff depending on the situation. And as always, we're not just committed to our students and our staff members in the building, but working with our community and our family by providing webinars, so that parents can be informed and parents can be supported as well. So Paul Sibley now will highlight some of those additional resources at the secondary level.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lakari. Good evening, everyone. I just want to start by saying that, in addition to all that we offer, we're also committed to continuous improvement of what we're able to provide and do for our students as it relates to mental health, and the proactive positive behavior supports and education that Ms. Lakari was referencing. We know that mental health and behavioral supports really begins with relationships and connectedness with all students and adults in our buildings. But it's also very important to point out that there are specific positions and efforts that we've have taken and are taking at the secondary level within our middle schools and our high schools. Each of our buildings at the secondary level have multiple counselors. So we have 11 counselors serving our 4 middle schools, and we have 17 counselors serving our 5 high school buildings, which are comprised of our 2 comprehensive 9th grade centers, the 2 10th through 12th grade comprehensive high school buildings, as well as our alternative high school, Mohegan. Our counselors are committed to serving their students in any way they can, but are specifically skilled in identifying resources for students and families while guiding them through their academic careers. Our counselors are often a strong relationship point for many of our students who need someone to run ideas by or need support during difficult times. We also have behavior interventionists at each of the secondary buildings who work with a specific group of identified students on their decision making and their daily approach to their daily relationships and their education. We have student assistance specialists at each of our 9th grade centers and at each of our 10th through 12th grade buildings who provide a range of prevention and intervention services related to student substance use and associated issues, support groups, as well as referral services to parents. Our assistant specialists also work in partnership with our coalition teen councils, which were referenced earlier in each of the 2 high schools. And I'll highlight some of the many events and projects that our CTC students work on in a few minutes. We have social workers and psychologists who support each of our secondary buildings, sometimes multiple in a building, depending on the size of that building. Each of our schools, as Ms. Lakari mentioned, incorporates positive behavior interventions and support programs known as PBIS. Sometimes those are associated with elementary schools only, but PBIS programs exist in all of our buildings at all levels. The main focus of our PBIS programs are related to concepts like academic preparation, respect, integrity, dedication, and empathy. Each of our schools discusses what behavior and treatment of others should look like on a regular basis. They also organize events to promote positive behaviors throughout the school year. Some of the examples would be things like wellness weeks, kindness jars, message boards, You Matter campaigns, as well as simple things like reminders related to all of these topics through PA announcements. All of these topics are also specifically addressed by teachers at the beginning of the years in the middle schools and our 9th grade centers. They do this through presentations that are directly related to the PBIS program. Each school has a PBIS team which organizes these events and the messages that are delivered on a regular basis. Administrators and counselors have also been trained and utilize restorative practices with our students regularly when there is conflict. Each building, as Ms. Lakari mentioned, has a crisis team who at times will work independently or they work collaboratively with the district crisis team mentioned earlier. Our building teams work with the DCT who provides resources, support to each of our buildings. This year, there's been a major focus on communication related to suicide risk assessments and providing support and consistency in our approach across the district with students who are at risk. Our schools offer presentations, programs for parents, often called dialogue nights, which incorporate parent education and our own students talking about experiences in our schools. Our Coalition Teen Council programs at each high school are something we're extremely proud of. These kids do amazing work. I mentioned that we honored them recently, but they're involved in a variety of school and community events that bring awareness to social issues facing our youths in today's society. So with support from our assistant specialists, the CTCs organize welcome back events for students, new student luncheons, forums for students to attend and learn about decision making, life skills, and substance use prevention. They provide resources about outside agencies that can assist with a variety of struggles that teens face today, including substance use, suicide, grief and loss, social media, stress and anxiety management, and even safe driving. These students do everything they can just to make sure that their peers know that there are resources out there and that they can often point them in the right direction. Again, something we're extremely proud of, and we love that it's grown to what it is today, through the leadership of our assistant specialists and Dr. McGunn. The dedication of those kids and commitment is something that's truly impressive, and especially when they're navigating such a tough time in their lives at their ages. All that being said, I'll now bring it back to Dr. Broski, who will talk about one additional resource that Chippewa Valley has invested in to be available to our students that we're extremely proud of. Dr. Broski.
Thanks, Mr. Sibley. So for the past 2 years, the district has made available a program that provides counseling, crisis intervention, and resources for our students called the Student Life Advisor Wellbeing Program. This evening, we have Mr. Kent Sharkey, CEO and founder, and Melissa Pardalis, account manager of Viewliance, a provider that specializes in services to help keep students emotionally and physically fit while supporting parents along the way. Mr. Sharkey?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Don. When I listen to the statistics, both pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, I can't think about how difficult it is to be a parent and raising children and trying to do the best that you can. 50 years ago, I was a troubled youth, and my single mother had none of these resources. So I really commend Chippewa Valley Schools for all the resources that are available. Back then, we were told to quit crying before I give you something to cry about. So there were no resources like you're offering. So I can't thank you enough. The Student Life Advisor program, in addition to all the resources that you have talked about, really provides wraparound services and 24 hours a day. So after school at 3 a.m, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Sunday, we're there to support students and their parents and their families. Next slide. Just a brief overview of the services. We provide counseling, crisis intervention, additional resources in the community. We may refer back to Chippewa Valley to utilize one or several of their outstanding resources. And we have a Student Life Advisor Wellbeing portal that's filled with information and resources, ways to contact us if you're a student or a parent. So why call? I grew up in the John Wayne School of Child Rearing, and back then we were taught never talk about feelings because you weren't allowed to have any. The other thing we were taught was never acknowledge that you're having a difficulty because that might mean that you can't handle it or that you're weak, and we don't air our dirty laundry in public. So 50 years ago, there was a great deal of stigma around personal life challenges. What we've learned, what the world has learned, the globe has learned following the pandemic, is that we all have mental health issues. We all have physical health issues. Mental health and physical health are absolutely one and the same thing. So much of the stigma associated with being human, which means we have stress, we have psychological pressure, we have things, good things happen or bad things happen to good people rather. And so particularly the students have learned that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to talk about things when they're not going well. It's okay to get some advice, as long as it's not from your parents. That's typically when you're a teenager, right? I say that tongue in cheek. But oftentimes a third party will be able to get through to your child when, as a parent, you might be saying the exact same things, but it just is heard differently. So when you notice your child's withdrawn, defiant, is struggling with something, and when they come in from school and you say, "How was your day?" and they kind of groan, maybe say fine, kind of go into their room, maybe get a bowl of cereal. We can have discussions with parents about how do you approach a child when you know it's not fine and you know there's something going on. The way it impacts parents or students and parents is divorce. Divorce is at a 52% rate in our communities, and that impacts the whole family. And so how can you minimize that impact and try to make it less impactful. And so we have ideas around that. We provide short-term counseling, and something that's very common is when somebody passes away. It might be a grandparent. In my situation, my father died when I was 10. Didn't really understand that at a young age like that. You don't really understand feelings and what that means. So we provide services from kindergarten to 12th grade, and think of us as kind of a wraparound service to the already existing services that are available. Melissa, I'm going to turn this over to you a little bit.
Sure, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. And I too echo what Kent said, just the wonderful services that the district is providing. So back to the Student Life Advisor program. When it is easy to connect with the program, we have an 800 number, and a student with a parent or a student that's 16 or over can go ahead and call that 800 number and speak to one of our Life Advisor consultants. All of our consultants are behavioral health experts. They have behavioral health degrees, and they are trained to help determine if someone is in a crisis when they call, and connect with that student and try to just see what that student needs in the moment. We talked about a lot of the different mental health issues going on. Sometimes students have that pressure on them that maybe something good is about to happen and they just need someone to talk to. So we're here, like Kent said, 24/7. It is confidential. We do not report back to the school that a student called. This is confidential, HIPAA protected information. And like I said, we are here to support. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Nope, sorry. I'm so sorry. I have a different, there we go, counseling. So let's talk about the counseling. It is 1 to 5 sessions per issue that a student is struggling with. It's short-term solution focused, which basically means we're going to try to get in there, like I said, assess and identify the issue that the student is dealing with. We're going to get to the core of the problem, identify solutions, and then we're going to develop a plan of action. We're going to help that student meet the goals with that plan of action and adjust as needed. The counseling can be in person, telephonic, or video-based. As I said, we have all licensed counselors, master's level, and this service can be utilized more than one time. So if a student has an issue at the beginning of the school year, maybe they're having difficulty adjusting to a new school year, they can call and use the services. And maybe at the end of the year, there's another issue that comes up for them. Maybe they've lost a person in their life or even a pet. They can use the counseling services again. Thank you. Okay, crisis intervention. As we said, our number is available 24/7. We recently, from another school district, had a student call late in the evening, and he was struggling because he had found out he didn't get into the college that he really wanted to get into. So even, like I said, things like that, those stressors weigh heavy on students. We know that. So we're here. We were able to talk to that student, help him kind of get through that really difficult moment, and just move on from there. Okay. We have the Student Life Advisor Wellbeing Portal, and the URL is right here, studentlifeadvisor.com. But this and many of our other information and promotional items and information can be found on the district's website. And you can find that under the parent section under mental health services. So there's a lot of explanation there, but the portal is easy to log into. You would go to studentlifeadvisor.com. You log in with the student name and the school city. And the cities, well, we can share that information later. The portal includes many different resources for parents and students. There are videos on the portals. There are lots of activities to do, and it's a very, very good resource if you want to look up any type of information regarding mental health, regarding emotional health, regarding activities to do. Kent, do you want to add to that, or no? You're on mute.
Thank you. There are financial calculators, there's budget calculators. We talk about all areas of well-being, or what we refer to as total well-being. And I wanted to comment, Melissa mentioned that the service that we offer is confidential. The two exceptions would be is if a child or a student was deemed to be suicidal or homicidal, we would be required by federal and state law to report that, particularly if we knew what the target was. We don't run into that very often. We do help with anger management issues and really give appropriate outlets for those feelings of frustration and anger, things of that nature. A lot of times parents and students, and you and me, when something happens in our life, even if it's positive, but it's very stressful, we're really not sure where to turn and who to turn. We oftentimes will go to our friends and our relatives, who I've learned over the years don't always give the best advice. It's always well-intentioned, but not always the most effective. And so we're an objective third party. We get it. We understand it. We get the parents involved whenever we can. We think that's really important. There's an old adage, it takes a village to raise a child, and we ascribe to that, and we believe that the more support a student can get, particularly in the day of social media and all that's going on in our country and world, it can be a pretty doubting place. And so again, wraparound services to what already exists for the students and their parents. Next slide, please. So really, to create success outside of the classroom, we deal a lot with anxiety issues, depression, but one of the things that Melissa touched on, overachiever students oftentimes can come from a very stressful family, and the way that that student deals with it is through shining, whether that be in sports, whether that be academically, musically. And those kids have a lot of pressure. They put a lot of pressure on themselves, and sometimes it's through home. Sometimes perfectionism develops. And so school-related stressors we deal with as well. And again, we're very aware of the resources that Chippewa Valley schools have. So we'll link back into those resources when appropriate.
Right. And speaking of that, I would like to add, we mentioned the teen coalitions. We are working closely with one of the groups this summer to give them some support in dealing with stress and how to teach others how to deal with stress. So we're practicing on some coping skills, things like that, so that then they can be better at what they do. So we appreciate being part of that.
Yeah. So in summary, it's confidential. There's no cost to the student or the parent for the short-term counseling that the Student Life Advisor program provides. It's a benefit by being in the Chippewa Valley School District and their compassion and to care for their students and their families. And it's a short call away. So thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, our question and answer, there's a chat at the top right. If any of our community members would like to submit a question, you can use that to submit the question, and we will field it to the best person to help answer it. We'll wait for a minute to see what questions come in.
Sarah, while we're waiting for that, I'll just tell you briefly of the process. So it starts with a call to our 1-800 number. We're located in southeastern Michigan, and we have professional counselors that answer the calls. They'll discuss what the program is. We'll tell them that it's confidential. There's no cost to them. It's 1 to 5 counseling sessions. And then we'll make a referral for longer term counseling when needed. And if it's a child that's under the age of 14, then we require a parent or a guardian to provide permission unless they're in crisis, they're actively in crisis. Then again, we're required ethically and through state law to actually address that crisis with them and make sure that they're safe and that there's a plan. If they're 14 or over, then a child can receive counseling services on their own. As I mentioned earlier, we attempt always to get the student involved and the parent involved with that student. And typically we're pretty successful at that. After we talk with the student about the potential benefit of addressing and bringing in more supports, sometimes not both parents are supportive. So it's case by case basis how we would address that. And then we'd set them up with counseling.
Thank you, Kent. Everyone was so prepared tonight. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. I know our district is very excited to be able to offer the Alliance service to our students and provide that extra support. And if you do have questions that you're not comfortable submitting in this forum, feel free to reach out to your building resources, your building principal. Those psychologists and counselors and social workers can certainly point parents in the right direction if they need support in terms of supporting their children or direct support for our children. So with that, I'd like to bring back Mr. Roberts.
Sure, I would just like to close this by thanking the panel tonight, both our district administrators and also Alliance. We're really excited about our alliance with Alliance. I think it's very helpful to our students. And some might wonder why we consider this so important. We think it fits perfectly with our mission as educators. Our job is to send students into the world when they graduate from high school, ready for that next step, whether that be going to college, going into a trade, entering the military, going right into the workforce. And we know that for students to achieve all that they want to achieve and meet their goals in life, it's not only about having academic success and knowledge and learning how to work with others, it's really about having good mental health. And so it fits perfectly, and for that reason, it's a big part of our district mission. So with that, I want to thank the community for being here, and have a pleasant evening. It's still very sunny out there, a little bit windy, but I think if you get out there right now, you can get your grass cut before the weekend. So thank you, and good night.